Shout out to Cam Jurgens, Nick Gates, O'Shawn Mathis, former Huskers, Super Bowl champs, Terry Braden. Now I assume will officially be heading to Lincoln, the Chiefs' assistant D-line coach. All right, he's already got 3 rings, so didn't quite get the 4th, but he's done pretty well for himself there with the Chiefs. Hopefully he does even better here with the Huskers going forward. It's interesting when you think about Cam Jurgens, and most folks will remember, the number 1 recruit in the state of Nebraska, out of Beatrice, came in as a tight end. And I believe he redshirted, and I'll never forget that spring. I'm going to spring practice. I believe Frost was just hired. It could have been going into year 2 of Frost. I don't recall. I don't remember the exact time frame. But I'm chatting with then offensive line coach Greg Austin, my former teammate here at Nebraska for 4 years, a man that I did one-on-one pass rush drill and one-on-one Okie drill with, God, countless times. And we're just standing there chatting, and he brings up Cam Jurgens out of nowhere. Like a 260-pound tight end, redshirted, hadn't played yet. And he goes, we're going to move him to center. And I remember looking at him. Interesting. You got to keep in mind, this was a long time ago. So obviously now it looks like a glorious decision. At the time, I was like, that's interesting. Why? And so what actually prompted this was I saw a tweet yesterday from an account that actually does a really good job. But they said, remember, Scott Frost was the guy that tried to play Cam Jurgens at tight end. And I saw that, and I was like, no, that's actually not accurate. Scott Frost effed up enough things. Let's not give him credit for stuff he didn't get wrong, okay? So my point is, they actually moved him to center. And I think Frost said something to the effect of potentially the next Dave Remington, was what he actually said. So let's give credit where credit is due, not unnecessary credit when the guy already, did enough things in the opposite direction of what he would have liked. They actually got it right by moving him to center. And they said, I remember Greg's like, we're so excited about this. Like, his eyes lit up. Greg's not a big emotional type. Like, he's not going to show you a lot of emotion, but his eyes got huge. Okay? He goes, we're legit excited about this. And most folks will remember when Cam first went to center, he struggled snapping the ball. We had all sorts of snapping issues, shotgun issues. Not all that different from last year, although those were special teams, long snapping issues versus center, shotgun, quarterback type snapping issues. It's not as easy as you might think, ladies and gentlemen. It's not as easy as you might think. And for some reason, everybody always tried to make me a long snapper, and I'll never understand why, but I've already shared that story in the past. So obviously, Cam has a little bit of a challenge getting the snaps down, but by the time he's done, he's a second-round pick here at Nebraska, goes off to the Eagles, is behind Jason Kelce, the best center in the league, who, by the way, a lot of people were like, that guy's too small. Jason Kelce's too small. It just turned out to be the best center in the freaking league. His first year full-time starting, Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion. I thought that was cool because stories like that, going from tight end to center to the kid can't snap the ball. Oh, by the way, I talked about this about a month ago, but the Remington Award winner for Ohio State transferred from Alabama. You remember that Rose Bowl game versus Michigan where they struggled to snap the ball? Remember that, Jake?
Yeah, I do.
Just to snap the ball. The shotgun snaps. Guy a year later goes to Ohio State. Tore his Achilles with a month left in the season and was such a good center. The same guy who struggled to snap the ball wins the freaking Remington Award and was a finalist for the Outland Trophy. Now, he didn't win it. Maybe he doesn't tear his Achilles and finish the season. Maybe he wins that too. It's just playing center is a lot harder than people really think. You're really the quarterback of the O-line. You are in the middle. You're the one calling out the mic. You're the one calling a lot of the protections. If anything needs to be changed within just the lineman, obviously the quarterback's doing the whole offense. Any audibles, all right, and changes that need to be made in the play call, but you are really the quarterback of the O-line. You're in the center. You got to snap and you got to block. You're usually a guy that's between 300 and 350 pounds. Now, typically you've got a guard helping you, so very rarely is it one-on-one. All right, but the center usually has to be the smartest guy on the O-line or the guy who understands everything the best mentally. And it kind of leads me to Jalen Hurts a little bit. I have been an immense Jalen Hurts fan since the instant he got benched in that national championship game versus Georgia. I mean, they weren't going to win if he stayed in the game. Saban did the right thing. The amount of, remember, was Tua a true freshman or had he redshirted?
I think he's a true freshman.
Think about, so Jalen Hurts was in his second year of starting. He already had played in a national championship game the year before as a redshirt freshman against Clemson. He was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year as a sophomore. You get to the national championship game versus Georgia. Your offense is struggling. Jalen's struggling. And Nick Saban puts in a true freshman named Tua Tagovailoa at halftime. and they come back and they win the game. An unprecedented move that I don't feel like has been talked about enough. By the way, you'll know this, Jake, but who did he throw? Who did Tua throw the game-winning touchdown pass to? I think it was like a 56-yard pass to win the game versus Georgia. You remember who caught that pass?
Yeah, Devontae Smith.
The future Heisman Trophy winner. By the way, did you know no Alabama player had ever scored a touchdown in a Super Bowl before yesterday?
I saw that too. It's surprising.
Devontae caught a touchdown late in the game's first Alabama player to ever score a touchdown in a Super Bowl before. I thought that was a crazy stat. So the guts that Saban showed to make that move in the middle of a national championship game when everything matters the most, and if Tua goes in and plays bad, you're going to get eviscerated for taking out the SEC Offensive Player of the Year and putting in a true freshman who hadn't played a meaningful snap all year. But it turned out to work out all right. The next year, Tua, Jalen, they battle for the starting job. Tua wins. Now, the ironic part, do you remember the next SEC championship game where Alabama was playing Georgia and Georgia was dominating Alabama in the first half? Like, they were up by like 2 touchdowns at one point. Do you remember that game?
There's been so many Georgia-Alabama games, it's hard to remember. But, yeah, to a degree.
So, Tua gets hurt, and Jalen has to come in. And he leads them back to a win over Georgia. It's like without both of those guys, at certain points, Alabama doesn't beat Georgia for the national title. They don't beat Georgia the next year for the SEC title. Okay, keep in mind, Michigan has beaten Alabama more in 2024 alone. They beat them on January 1st of 2024, and I think it was December 31st was the bowl game. Beat them twice in 2024, more times than Georgia's beaten Alabama since 2007, which is one time. But I digress. My point is simply, it was amazing how that all played out. So Jalen goes, he ultimately transfers to Oklahoma. And this wasn't a guy who just hit the portal right away. After he got benched that national title game, he stayed around for another year. He fought for that job. He came in and swung the momentum of that game against Georgia in the SEC title game when Tua got out, had to be taken out because of injury. And they ended up winning because of the change of quarterback, this time in favor of Jalen. So he ends up transferring finally to Oklahoma. I don't want to say finally, but he did everything he could at Alabama. Just Tua was going to be the starter the next year. Transfers to Oklahoma. He's a Heisman finalist, second-round pick going into the league, and everybody's doubting him. And I'm gonna put myself in there. I was like, really? You spent a second-round pick on this dude? He got benched. I was like, that's crazy. Third round, maybe. But I would have never spent a second-round pick. Well, what do I know? This guy is now a Super Bowl champion and a Super Bowl MVP. Think about that. Think about this, Jake. He went from being benched in a national title game to a Super Bowl champion. He went from losing his starting job at Alabama to being the Super Bowl MVP. Like, I don't know. If anybody is out there has a bit of the post-Super Bowl Monday morning blues, that's pretty motivational to me. What are your thoughts on something like that and that story? I don't think it's been talked about enough. But what do you think, Jake?
Well, it's a heck of a story, and it's cool. That's what the Super Bowl story is, right? Like, going through it, I always kind of think of where have these guys been, and there's a lot of guys that you can do that for. And to watch a guy like Cam Jurgens, who grew up in Nebraska, and you know, to like you said, the trials and tribulations he went through, even as a center at Nebraska. I think I was on the airwaves saying, this guy, we got to find something else. This guy's not the next day.
I may have said a sentence or two at some point.
Right. So to watch, you know, all that struggles, and then the Jalen Hurts thing, like to go back on it, I think this, you know, because I thought about that last night. I was thinking, you know, if you would have told him at that time, which would have been such a frustrating night where your team's the national champion, but individually you feel like you let everybody down, to tell him that someday he'd be a Super Bowl MVP would be really special for him. And you know, also there's like, it's cool how things happen and they're very much like you could tell the story in the moment, but over time that story changes and maybe there's more weight put on it. And that's kind of what happened with that call for Saban now. Now we look back and said he benched a Super Bowl MVP for a true freshman, and it worked.
Oh, it's crazy.
And it worked.
It worked out both ways because Tua came in and saved that national title game. Jalen came in, saved the SEC title game, goes to Oklahoma. Heisman Trophy finalist, which I think people forget about. Lincoln Riley, man, I mean, he's under fire at USC right now, and rightfully so, but he can develop quarterbacks. Caleb Williams, Jalen Hurts. I forget? There's one more guy in there. Mayfield, right?
Yeah, from when he's there, yeah.
Mayfield. I mean,
Kyler Murray. To keep throwing him out.
Good Lord. I mean, he don't know how to coach defense. He don't know his rear end from a hole in the ground when it comes to coaching defense, although they were better last year. By the way, that's a Jacob Burney saying. And I said rear end instead of what he actually says, my old D-line coach from the Redskins. I got so many Jacob Burney sayings, but I can only say about half of them on air. I've got to edit about half the ones I can say. But, man, he can coach quarterbacks, Heisman Trophy winners, #1 overall picks, Super Bowl MVPs. He may not even be the coach there at USC in a couple of years if he doesn't do a lot better next year. It's crazy to me. We'll see what happens, though.